Tonight, a battle over health care that could affect millions.
It's done me a lot of good, and honestly, I wouldn't have known where to turn or where to sign up for insurance.
The latest Supreme Court challenge to the Affordable Care Act. And
this election is not over. Far from it.
President Trump doubling down on bold claims of mail-in fraud and stolen votes. Meanwhile, as the country marks 20 million COVID cases, Americans are hopeful about the promising news of potential vaccines. And a country divided, how Christians can bridge the gap through God's command to pray. Plus,
he loved this show and everything it stood for.
A moving tribute to the late Jeopardy host, Alex Trebek. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The fate of Obamacare back at the High Court. Welcome to Faith Nation, everyone. I'm John Jessup. Well, all 9 justices of the Supreme Court heard what is expected to be one of this term's biggest cases, another challenge to the Affordable Care Act, which could well be on the line. CBN's Paul Strand reports on today's oral arguments and where the court appears to be leaning.
This is the case that got all the attention at Amy Coney Barrett's hearings as Democrats put up big photos of all sorts of sick people they say will lose their health care if Obamacare is wiped out through this case. Now we'll see if all that fear was justified. It's true that the Trump administration and a number of red states were asking the court to use this case to kill the entire Affordable Care Act. But it sounded like the justices were looking for a way to hack away at what needs to go and leave the rest of Obamacare intact.
They said the court should first get rid of, as unconstitutional, the individual mandate that commands people to buy health insurance.
The mandate is best read as a command to purchase health insurance, and that is unconstitutional. And the text of the law says that the remainder of the ACA cannot work without that individual mandate.
But Obamacare supporters argued at first they thought its individual mandate, or stick, would be essential because the carrots offered wouldn't be enough to get people to buy health insurance. Lawmakers, however, have found the mandate isn't needed.
I don't think there's any doubt that the 2010 Congress thought that stick was important. But it's turned out that the carrots work without the stick.
The individual mandate was like a part in an airplane that was essential to keep the plane flying, so that if that part was taken out, the plane would crash. But now the part has been taken out and the plane has not crashed.
Now the ACA supporters say wiping the whole act out would be disastrous.
It would cause enormous regulatory disruption, upend the markets, cast 20 million Americans off health insurance during a pandemic, and cost the states tens of billions of dollars during a fiscal crisis.
What's most likely to happen here is the justices will do what they often have before, practice severability. That is, sever what needs to go and let the rest of the Affordable Care Act survive.
This is a very straightforward case for severability under our precedents, meaning that we would excise the mandate and leave the rest of the act in place.
Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Supreme Court.
All right, thank you, Paul. Well, joining us now, Ilya Shapiro, director of the Center for Constitutional Studies at the Libertarian Cato Institute. He is also the author of the new book, Supreme Disorder. Ilya, thanks for being with us. I know Cato filed a friend of the court brief and concluded that the court could rule parts of the ACA unconstitutional and thereby allow people who like it to keep it and those who object to purchase insurance policies outside of the exchanges. Did what you hear today seem to suggest that the court bought that argument?
Well, ours was a very narrow technical argument about people buying policies on the individual market, not on Obamacare exchanges, not through employer or anything like that. It looks to me like there certainly is a clear majority to sever. That is, the mandate, whether they're going to go as granular as I was suggesting in my brief remains to be seen, but the chance of the entirety of Obamacare to fall is about zero.
Ilya, during her confirmation hearing, Judge Amy Coney Barrett's opponents characterized her appointment as a death knell to Obamacare. What was your takeaway from her line of questioning today?
Well, nothing today was really unexpected, and the Democratic senators and others who were saying that Barrett would be the deciding vote to strike down Obamacare or the deciding vote either way were either disingenuous or didn't understand what this case was all about.
Finally, this case is the result of Congress zeroing out the mandate's tax penalty back in 2017. Several cases have made their way to the Supreme Court. Regardless of the ruling in today's case, do you anticipate this to be the final word on the Affordable Care Act?
Well, it's probably the last case that can be characterized as an existential challenge, that is, a challenge to all of the law. At this point, it becomes just like any other big piece of law, big federal program. The Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act have been around for nearly 50 years, and there are different aspects of them, or different regulations promulgated under them are still challenged, and that will certainly continue. Well, the healthcare lawyers are not going to go out of business.
All right, Cato's Ilya Shapiro, an author of Supreme Disorder. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Well, to the election now. The North Carolina Senate race has a winner. Republican Tom Tillis is returning to Washington after Democratic challenger Cal Cunningham conceded today, a week after the election. Cunningham down by some 95,000 votes, saying the voters have spoken. Meanwhile, Attorney General Bill Barr has given the green light to investigate, quote, substantial election fraud, while warning against fanciful, speculative, and far-fetched claims, writing in a memo that U.S. attorneys may conduct reviews if there are clear and apparently credible allegations of irregularities that, if true, could impact the outcome of a federal election in an individual state. The Trump campaign's legal machine shows no sign of slowing down, filing 2 new lawsuits Monday in Pennsylvania and Michigan, and making good on a promise for more election litigation. Senior Washington correspondent Tara Mergener joins us now with more on the legal front. Tara?
John, most of these lawsuits challenge the process of tabulating votes, question ballots that arrived late, or charge that GOP election monitors were not allowed to effectively monitor the counting. Several cases will play out in Pennsylvania, a state where Trump led but shifted to Biden over the weekend, giving the former VP a lead of less than 0.7%.
In Philadelphia and Allegheny counties, there were over 682,000 ballots that were tabulated outside the view of our observers who are entitled by law to review those ballots.
The Trump campaign wants to stop the state from certifying results until it can review the votes. This action, filed on behalf of 2 voters, is based on reports Republican election workers were blocked from observing vote counts in Philadelphia. A separate lawsuit ordered all 67 counties to segregate mail-in ballots where voters did not provide supplemental identification by November 9th.
There are thousands of reports of poll watchers being intimidated and unable to do their job. And as of 4 p.m. this afternoon, 131 affidavits have been completed just in Michigan, with over 2,800 incident reports that have been submitted to us since Election Day.
On Monday, RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel focused fraud accusations on Michigan, which Biden won by about 2.7%, or about 140,000 votes. The lawsuit demands that certification of results be blocked in Wayne County, home to Detroit. Last week, Georgia election officials announced a recount given the current Biden winning margin of just more than 10,000 votes. Trump officials believe the recount could potentially turn up evidence of fraud and irregularities. Out west in Nevada, Biden currently leads by some 36,000 votes. In its lawsuit there, the Trump campaign claims at least 10,000 people voted in Nevada after moving to another state, and that it has the names of 3,000 of them. And in Arizona, the lawsuit claims Maricopa County poll workers mishandled ballots and threw away votes. There are also charges new machines gave some voters error messages and that poll workers canceled the votes by overriding the error. The lawsuit requests an audit and manual examination of these ballots.
So you have all kinds of allegations of irregularity and outright fraud, and those things need to be litigated. We need to get to the bottom of this to make sure that we have a fair and accurate, legitimate count. And every American should want that, regardless of whether you supported President Trump, whether you supported Joe Biden, or whether you didn't vote at all.
And as of Monday, 24 Wisconsin counties completed canvassing of last week's election results. All 72 counties must be in before the president can call for a recount, as his campaign says it intends to do. John.
Well, Brad Jacob is an associate dean at Regent University School of Law. He joins us now for more. Brad, thanks for being with us. Let's start with the constitutional question. Who is responsible for overseeing elections?
Well, in presidential elections are primarily the responsibility of the states. The Constitution says that each state has to certify its own electors, whoever was chosen by the state to vote for president of the United States. So Congress has a limited role. Congress chooses election day. And then if the Electoral College is unable to select a winner, it falls back to Congress. But most of the decisions through the process are being made at a state level.
And does that give more room or less room for any potential nefarious malfeasance when it comes to election results?
I don't know whether it gives more or less. You can always bring a lawsuit, and I think the president will bring lawsuits challenging various things in the different states. And if there's any serious evidence of wrongdoing, then those suits will have to be heard. And if there isn't serious evidence, the suits will be thrown out fairly quickly. But I don't know that the state's involvement changes that particularly.
Brad, as you well know, the legal wrangling over the election is getting a lot of attention. Is this helpful in promoting transparency in the process, or potentially harmful, undermining public confidence in our elections, or both?
Well, I think both, to an extent. I mean, it's certainly good that if there are questions and there are doubts, to have them out in the open. And, you know, we live in a society where the courts of law can decide disputed issues, and President Trump has that same right to use the courts as anyone else. On the other hand, at some point, elected officials have to be able to acknowledge the reality of the political process. And if Mr. Trump did, in fact, lose this election, one can only hope that at some point he'll acknowledge that and step down gracefully and support a smooth transition of power. Fighting against the results, if there's no legal ground to stand on, won't help him. He's got to have some facts to go forward.
Brad, we know there's a timeline with certification, and the state electors of the college of the Electoral College has to convene and draw its vote. But based on what we know now, what kind of timeline are we looking at, and how long might this play out?
Well, it's hard to say for sure. You know, with Bush v. Gore in 2000, we were right down to the day, the deadline day for the Electoral College before the Supreme Court acted. I'm not sure that there are any challenges here that are going to make it all the way to the Supreme Court. But again, we haven't seen much evidence at this point. If there's more evidence of wrongdoing than has been made available, who knows? My best guess would be that the states will, in fact, be able to certify their slates of electors. And when the Electoral College meets, I believe it's December 14th, that they will be able to cast their votes and select a president.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Brad Jacob, Associate Dean at Regent University, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
Turning now to the coronavirus and the race to find a vaccine, a major breakthrough. As we reported yesterday, Pfizer has released promising trial results that appear to be more than 90% effective. The news has raised hopes and the stock market. CBN's Jenna Browder has more.
Pfizer says it's already ramping up production of their vaccine. The American drug maker and a German partner hoping to be the first to produce and distribute an inoculation against the coronavirus.
The vaccine was proven to be very efficacious, overwhelmingly, and that was big news for me as well.
Not very many people expected it would be as high as that. A 90% efficacy just is extraordinary.
The drug is still in clinical trials, but Pfizer says early results show it appears to be about 90% effective in patients. And if approved by the end of the year, it expects to produce enough for about 25 million people. But that's for people around the world and not just in the U.S.
Look that way for me.
The first to get the vaccine, healthcare workers and groups like seniors who are most at risk. While Pfizer is now planning to ask the FDA for emergency use authorization of the drug as soon as next week, it could be late spring before it's distributed to the general population. But some tough months could still be ahead, the U.S. reporting more than 10 million cases and 5 days in a row with more than 100,000 new cases. And News Now's Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Ben Carson, has tested positive. Meanwhile, Joe Biden has put together his own coronavirus task force and Monday called on all Americans to wear masks.
There's a need for bold action to fight this pandemic. We're still facing a very dark winter.
President Trump and his supporters are questioning the timing of Pfizer's announcement. The company's CEO, though, says it had nothing to do with the election and that Pfizer didn't take any federal dollars for its research to keep the vaccine from being politicized.
I wanted to liberate our scientists from any bureaucracy that could come by accepting money.
And Wall Street reacted positively to the news Monday, the stock market soaring some 1,600 points before settling back to an 836-point gain at closing, its best daily increase in 5 months. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thank you, Jenna. Coming up, exploring how evangelical Christians are reacting to the election results and one pastor's reminder that the world is watching.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
It's about the competition.
I kind of put that pressure on myself, and I think people had expectations.
It's about overcoming.
We use this phrase all the time, keep chopping, keep practicing hard.
It's about going the distance.
I think as a father, it's my job, to lead, just be the best husband and father I can be.
Watch Going the Distance with Sean Brown Saturday night at 7:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Orphans Promise is committed to loving and serving at-risk children, to helping keep families together, and to creating opportunities for strong and sustainable communities around the world. We're working in over 60 countries around the world, and with your help, we can do even more. There's an old African proverb I love that says, if you want to run fast, run alone. But if you want to run far, run together. At Orphans Promise, we want to run far so we can touch the lives of as many orphaned and vulnerable children as possible. But we don't want to go alone. We're out to change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. Will you join us?
Welcome back. Former Vice President Joe Biden appears to be on his way to becoming the 46th President of the United States. And according to one prominent pastor, that might be a tough pill to swallow for millions of evangelical Trump supporters. Trump's agenda was largely seen as pro-Judeo-Christian, but the results of last week's election have left some to wonder, what is God doing? Texas pastor Robert Jeffress tackled that question in an op-ed titled, "Biden is President-elect, How Should Christians Respond?" In it, he reminds believers the world is watching. Well, joining us now is Pastor Robert Jeffress of First Baptist Church in Dallas. He is also a spiritual advisor to President Trump. Pastor Jeffress, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, first off, have you had a chance to talk to President Trump after the election? How are you encouraging him?
Well, actually, the vice president called me a couple of days after the election, and we talked quite a bit about everything that was going on. And look, we realized that most likely the election results are going to be contested, and there's nothing official yet, but it does look like that Joe Biden will become the president-elect unless the president prevails in some of these contests of the election. And, this is a bitter pill for millions of Christians like myself who supported President Trump. And it's hard to believe that this has happened. And many Christians I found are questioning, why would God allow this to happen? And I just remind people that God is sovereign over everything, including elections. In Psalm 103, verse 19, the psalmist said, The Lord has established his throne in heaven. His sovereignty rules over all. God is not semi in control. He is in control of all that happens, including elections.
What a wonderful reminder there. You say, Pastor Jeffress, that former Vice President Joe Biden, if he takes office, it is a, quote, rubber meets the road moment for believers. Why do you say that?
Well, for the last 4 years, those of us who have supported President Trump, and there's been no pastor who's been more outspoken in his support of President Trump than I have. But over the last 4 years, we've told people that you need to respect the governing authorities. We quote Paul in Romans 13, who says there's no government authority that exists that hasn't been established by God. And when Paul wrote that, remember, Nero, the evil emperor of Rome, was on the throne, and he was the one who ultimately beheaded the Apostle Paul. And yet Paul would say Nero's there by God's permission. And I think we have to say now that we believe that what we've said for the last 4 years, that if Joe Biden becomes president of the United States, it's all part of God's plan that is incomprehensible to us, but makes perfect sense to God.
You definitely put that in context with Paul and Nero. Pastor, how should we be praying as Christians, and what role should Christians play in healing what is clearly a divided America?
Well, I said in my opinion piece for Fox News that as Christians, we first of all should commend President Biden for any good things that he does. We ought to condemn the bad things that he does. But above all, we should pray for his success, just like we pray for Donald Trump and any president's success. Because the truth is, if President-elect Biden succeeds, we all succeed.
Pastor Jeffress, I wish we had much more time, but we are out of time. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Up next, what a new peace deal could mean for one of the world's oldest Christian communities stuck in a decades-old conflict.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Perlmutter, board-certified neurologist and #1 New York Times bestselling author. Wouldn't it be great to boost your energy, eliminate brain fog, and even reverse brain disease? Well, you can, and I'm going to show you how, along with some of the world's most well-respected brain experts in this DVD, Protect Your Brain.
Get Protect Your Brain, a free DVD only from the Christian Broadcasting Network, featuring experts on the cutting edge of neuroscience and brain health.
No matter how many times you've failed in the past, you really can do this.
In Protect Your Brain, you'll discover simple strategies to keep your brain young and healthy. Improve your memory. Discover the gut-brain connection. In Protect Your Brain, get your free copy at cbn.com or call 1-800-700-7000.
If you want to improve the quality of your life, get the DVD Protect Your Brain and get it today.
Some disturbing news here. ISIS militants reportedly have murdered 50 people in a gruesome attack in the African coastal nation of Mozambique. According to eyewitnesses, the victims were herded onto a soccer field in a northern village and then beheaded. Police add scores of women and children were abducted and homes were burned to the ground. Fighting erupted in the province in 2017 after an armed group with ties to ISIS began carrying out deadly attacks there. The unrest has led to the deaths of more than 2,000 people and displaced more than 300,000 others. Well, on Tuesday, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia signed an agreement to end the 6-week-long war between Armenians and Azeris. As CBN's Chris Mitchell reports, the deal stops the latest round of fighting in a decades-old conflict.
Armenia's prime minister called the deal incredibly painful for me and for our people. On Facebook, he said the decision was based on deep analysis of the combat situation and warned the whole of Nagorno-Karabakh would have been lost. The decades-old conflict reignited in September over Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan claims the area, although most living there are Armenian and part of one of the oldest Christian communities in the world. The disputed area sits between the two countries. When the Soviet Union fell in 1991, this self-governed region of Azerbaijan voted to join Armenia. The conflict pitted often friendly powerhouses against each other. Turkey backed Azerbaijan and provided military support, while both Russia and Iran sided with Armenia. One report said the Armenian army was outnumbered 5-1. In Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, the people celebrated, and its president called it a great victory and a capitulation by Armenia. The deal allows Azerbaijan to keep areas of Nagorno-Karabakh it seized during the war, and Armenia agreed to leave several other areas in the next few weeks. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced Russia would provide nearly 2,000 peacekeepers along the front lines. In the past few days, Azerbaijan captured one major city and was advancing towards the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh. Thousands of Armenians fled the area, many with nowhere to go.
What can a woman feel without a house, without belongings, without anything?
In the capital of Armenia, protesters stormed the parliament buildings, vowed to keep fighting, and said their leaders betrayed them.
We don't agree with the decision. We will not give them away. We will fight. And we don't want this. We don't want the government in our city and in our motherland.
The fighting pitted Christian Armenians and mostly Muslim Azeris against each other. CBN's Chuck Holton recently filed this report from the front lines.
Behind me, you can see the effects of the Azeri bombardment that has been hitting this city since September 27th. Of the 150,000 people who live in this area, most of them have already had to flee, but there are still tens of thousands of people that are staying here, sleeping in their cellars, in their basements, and listening to the daily barrage of random artillery that's falling on this city.
Some Armenians told Holton they saw the war as an existential threat.
They won't occupy our territory and clean this territory from Armenians.
Thousands died in the 6-week war, and given the decades-long history of the region, it's likely it may not be the end of the conflict. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Finally tonight, the show must go on. After 36 years hosting Jeopardy, Monday night's episode began with an unfamiliar face after longtime game show host Alex Trebek died after a 2-year battle with pancreatic cancer. Rather than seeing Trebek kick off the show with his classic This Is Jeopardy opening, it began with a somber tribute and a moment of silence.
On behalf of everyone here at Jeopardy, thank you for everything, Alex. This is Jeopardy.
When Trebek was diagnosed with cancer nearly 2 years ago, he was back at work less than a week later, resuming the taping schedule with his trademark positivity. Jeopardy will air the 80-year-old Trebek's final 36 pre-taped episodes through Christmas, and what a fitting tribute. Well, thanks so much for watching Faith Nation. See you tomorrow.